A capacity crowd here at Orange County International Raceway enjoying this first round of Top Fuel Eliminator competition.
And Steve, we're ready to move now into one of the most popular classes in all of championship drag racing, the nitro-powered Thunder of the fiberglass funny cars. The Budweiser King, Kenny Bernstein, as we pick up action in round number 1.
And Kenny's competition will be the 3-time world champion, the Schlitz Blue Max of Raymond Beetle from Dallas, Texas. The burnouts are maybe even more important for the funny cars. They've got to have traction. The engines are in front of the driver, further out on the chassis. They don't have quite the weight over the rear wheels. What a season it has been for Kenny Bernstein. He had a horrible start, then comes back to win the U.S. Nationals, the Big Bud Shootout, and $80,000 in one weekend. Raymond Beetle with the escape hatch up to let some cool air in and the smoke out.
The burnouts, a lot of people think, are just a waste of rubber, but they are not. The tires are actually designed to work when their temperatures are very hot, and the only way you can get them hot is to start them spinning and actually burn the rubber off of them, and here they go.
Kenny Bernstein was away first, but Bernstein suddenly having problems. Raymond Beetle at half track takes the advantage and wins it. Raymond Beetle in the Blue Max at 5.90, 243 miles an hour. Raymond Beetle goes into round number 2. Beetle was the 4th qualifier at 5.88. So it doesn't quite match that time, but has got some reasonable consistency going for him anyway.
Here's a man from the West Coast that has no major sponsorship other than his own. He races for the fun of it, and he is certainly one of the strongest racers going. That's Little John Lombardo. His competition is a known quantity. The Team Strange entry of Farconis, Coyle, and Minnick. They call it the Rislone Chi-Town Hustler, with Frank Hawley, the Winston World Champion, at the wheel.
You'll remember our telecast a year ago here at Orange County. It was Frank Hawley, this man, the underdog, battling for the world title. He won it here in the final race of the year. He comes in already the world champion, as Little John Lombardo well knows. Frank Hawley has clinched it on points already. The bonus money from Winston, some $40,000, is already his.
Little John Lombardo qualified number 6, Steve, at a 5.88. Hawley off the pace a bit for him at a 5.95. So Little John's got the performance edge going into this first round. Can he use his considerable driving skills to get him a win? We'll see.
Frank Hawley, early in the season, amassed those points on consistency. Everybody's running quicker now. It is Lombardo up in smoke. Hawley has problems. Hawley off the throttle and does not get back on the gas. For some unknown reason, Frank Hawley lifted a bit as he got close to the center line. Had he got back on the throttle, he probably could have driven around Little John Lombardo, but he did not. Lombardo wins it at a very slow 7 flat, but it doesn't matter. Lombardo goes into round 2, and the newly crowned world champion is on the trailer. The Canadian Frank Hawley is done for the day.
This racer, John Force, out of Southern California, has a multitude of sponsors. Der Wiener Schnitzel, Stop and Go Market, Mountain Dew, Jolly Rancher Candies. But John Force has become a force to be reckoned with. He is certainly one of the most competitive racers on the national event circuit today. His competition is Joe Pisano with Trip Shoemake at the wheel, a former Southern Nationals champion. Shoemake and Pisano teaming up for the '83 season.
In fact, it was Trip Shoemake who won the event title here 1 year ago, driving the Team B car of Billy Meyer. That is Larry Frazier, who has made the difference, John Force will tell you, in his effort. Frazier has wrenched this car to over 250 miles an hour this season. Force can now concentrate on driving and not worry about making the horsepower, because Frazier has plenty of it under the sleek hood of that Pontiac Trans Am. The far lane is Trip Shoemake. The near lane is John Force. First round of funny car action. They leave right together. John Force starting to pull ahead. John Force dominant here in this matchup at 580. 247 miles an hour. 580, 247 for John Force.
Force was the number 3 qualifier going into that race, Steve, at 578, and that's somewhat remarkable that the time in competition is that close to the qualifying time.
And coming to life, the engine of the number 1 qualifier, Don the Snake Perdone. The only man to ever win 4 funny car world titles. He qualified number 1 at a 574. Perdome told me earlier, Dave, that he just took all his fuel systems, all his combinations, put them in a bag, shook them up, poured one out, and it was either going to blow or go. It went.
It went good at a 574. But now the question is his longtime nemesis, and if you've been following the sport of drag racing for the past 2 decades, The name of the man in the far lane, Tom the Mongoose McEwen, brings back memories of all sorts of race cars. He is one of the more versatile drivers ever to grace a quarter-mile racetrack, and this matchup of the Snake versus the Mongoose goes back a good 20 years.
You bet it does. In fact, 18 years ago, Tom the Mongoose McEwen won the first race ever held here at Orange County International Raceway, and there's a good chance that this will be the last race ever held here, as the property has been deemed useful for commercial and industrial purposes. So McEwen would really like to win this one too, have both ends of that legend. Don Prudhomme. Tom McEwen is away first, but smokes the tires. McEwen used the Snake up on a starting line, but didn't have the clutch and tire combination. It is Prudhomme at 580, 245 miles an hour. Don Prudhomme, parachute out, slowing for the turn. He goes into round number 2.
Well, I'll tell you, it's going to make for a great second round with the performances of these cars here in round 1, with a 580 by Force and a 580 by Prudhomme. Let's see how the Chief Auto Parts 7-Eleven special of Billy Meyer from Waco, Texas fares in this first round of funny car competition.
Well, what a contrast you've got here. Billy Meyer with the epitome, the state-of-the-art in a funny car machine, up against mighty Mike Van Sant, which is probably the oldest active funny car in the country. And Van Sant really didn't qualify. He was the first alternate, but got in when another car had some problems.
And that was the Mike Dunn car, who qualified on the horrendous crash. And as you saw, Mike Van Sant made a move towards the center line. He had to lift, and that gave the win to Billy Meyer as he carried it through the quarter mile to a 5:96 elapsed time. Off the pace a bit, but he knew that he had the win, so he backed down to 229 miles an hour.
What a tribute, though, for mighty Mike. A 6:10 at 227 miles an hour. If he hadn't lifted, he might have beat him.
Our next pair of cars, we find the Miller High Life Warrior of Hamby and Poldy. Dale Poldy, the driver, Mike Hamby, his partner. And this is one of those touring cars that goes anywhere a major race is. Covers the country from coast to coast and border to border. And Mike Hamby and Dale Poldy have been traveling this circuit for several years.
Well, the same thing could be said about the beautiful multi-hued green machine in the far lane. The Super Brute from Fabergé, Al Segrini. Segrini won the Cajun Nationals this year. The pre-stage lights are on. Segrini moves into stage. Poldy's in. The pro start.
Identical reaction times for both drivers, and a close race as they get to the finish line. Al Segrini pulls it out, a 587 at 244 miles an hour to a losing 593. Just a few hundredths of a second make the difference at the finish line. It was about a half a car length, and Al Segrini advances into round number 2.
And our next pair will find this man. Talk about veterans. He's been doing this for 25 years. Henry Harrison, originally from Arkansas, has been living in Southern California the last 10 or 15 years, bouncing to a stop. His opponent over in the far lane, Sherm Gunn, who builds race cars for a living. And this is the first time that Sherm in that far line has ever qualified for a national championship event. He was an alcohol racer for a lot of years, had alcohol in that tank, and there's a bit of a transition to nitromethane, and Sherm has finally made it work.
Steve, this is a brand new car for Sherm Gunn. In fact, its debut performance qualified him in this very tough field. But for Henry Harrison, it's just another mark in a long and checkered career. I think Henry Harrison has driven practically every type of drag racing vehicle known. I can remember him in Arkansas driving the fuel altereds, driving roadsters, driving anything, top fuel dragsters. Now at the wheel of the funny car.
It is Sherm Gunn away first. Sherm Gunn in the far lane, and it is Sherm Gunn. The first win light in his professional drag racing career. A good race, a 6:04 to a 6:10.
Our next pair of cars, the engines coming to life as the electric starters spin over the superchargers. That then spins the engine over, and as they throw the switch, the nitromethane fuel coming to life in our next pair. This is Gary Dencham. He is a school teacher during the week, but a hardcore drag racer on the weekends. It was 2 years ago that Gary had an engine explosion and fire that literally burnt the funny car to the ground. But persevering as he does, Gary Dencham put it back together, and within just a few short weeks, he was back racing again.
With the help of his industrial arts students here in Southern California, he did all that. His competition will be Denny Savage. For years, a rented driver, a driver for hire, and this is the first weekend he has ever driven this car, the custom-bodied special from Utica, New York, owned by Fred Castronova. And Denny's done a wonderful job. His young crew chief out in front is one of the youngest of the professional crew chiefs, Ronnie Swearingen, only about 23 years of age.
This was an all 5-second field in qualifying, and Denny Savage brought up the number 16 spot at a 5:96. And considering it's the first race for him in that car, a very creditable effort for the Utica, New York-based Custom Body Enterprises car.
Denny Savage in the far lane as Buster Cat sets him. In the near line, the black car of Gary Densham. Pre-stage both drivers. Densham the first to move in stage. Savage is in, and Savage leaves first by 4/100ths of a second. Savage getting close to the center line. The escape hatch blowing out of Densham's car. It is Denny Savage and a ball of smoke at 6.18 to a quicker 6.15. So indeed there was a hole shot. 231 miles an hour as Carl Olson, one of the NHRA officials, wanders off with the escape hatch. He'll give it to Gary and he'll just plug it back in. A little bondo, it'll be all right.